All right. So you said you've seen them now 4 times, is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, 4
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
It's
And
been going okay. Like I thought it's going well, but I can see the lady is getting like really frustrated, like she's losing hope. Because like, and this is from my perspective and hers, like I think the guy feels like he doesn't really need to do a lot of work. And if he does, he's like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. But he, like, the lady has been doing a lot of work and he recognizes that, but he still thinks like she needs like to do a lot more, which is like obviously really hard for her because she's really putting in effort and trying. And I guess what they want me to just tell them what to do. And I was like, I like that doesn't work like that. And they're like, why do we keep like rehashing like old fights? Like they'll get into a fight. Like I'll be like, hey, describe like something that happened, whatever, last week or whatever. And so they'll start and it'll be good. Like he'll tell me what's going on, she'll tell me what's going on. And then they'll be like at one point, the guy will be like, nope, that's not how it went down. Like, don't lie about it like that. That's not correct. And I was like, it really doesn't matter how it went down. Like, that's just how she's feeling. And like, then they get into it about like what happened instead of like how they're feeling about it. And then he uses like really, like I would say like really mean words. And like she gets triggered and then she kind of starts like she'll like get upset or she'll shut down. And then he like it's more important for him to get his point across as opposed to like understand what's going on for her. So I told them like they both escalate each other so much and they trigger each other. And so they're like, tell me how to de-escalate, like tell us what to do. And I'm just like, she was like, I don't really like, she's like, I need you to like give us like specific things to do. Otherwise, like I don't see the point of like us doing this kind of thing. Um, and she said she was like really nice about it, how she said it, but I understand where she's coming from. But he was kind of like, no, we're gonna do this because he was kind of the one that gave her the ultimatum and was like, if we don't go to counseling, like it's over kind of thing. Um, so like I'm kind of struggling, like they're like, let's start off next session with you telling us how to de-escalate. Like you just need to like be straightforward. And I know the previous, like they were with a previous counselor with no fear, and I guess she wasn't as straightforward. And so they wanted someone more like just telling them what to do. And I'm trying to be straightforward, but I'm also like not gonna tell them what to do. And I guess like what I can see so far is like he's obviously like the withdrawer, she's a pursuer. And like he is like it's really important for him to feel respected. And so he constantly feels like her tone or like the way she talks, like she talks with her hands a lot. Um, and she's like loud and that's just like how she was brought up and stuff. And so he finds that disrespectful, but that's like how she grew up. And then so whenever he senses like any like change in her tone of voice or like she's using hand gestures, he like immediately will be like, you know, take it down. Like he'll just be like, calm down, take 5. I'm counting to 3 and then I'm going to kick you out of my apartment. Stuff like that, which like obviously triggers her because she's like, I'm talking normally. And so, and then he'll like mock her. Like he'll be like, eh, and then she escalates. So they're both escalating each other. And I said that like I'm like we have to work on like how to like the de-escalation process and like and recognizing your guys' own triggers and like compromising because she's willing to do that. Like she'll feel like, you know, he's triggering her, but she'll put that aside to try to get him to calm down, but he won't do the same for her.
okay.
Yeah.
So if I got you right, there's like, if we break it down into like 3 main areas,
Yeah.
she's losing hope. She feels like she's doing more of the work. So I've got some questions about that. The second is they're asking you to be more directive and trying or getting you to tell them what to do different than whatever it is that you're doing now. And then the third is arguing about content and like I want to make sure you get the story right, so we call that content, right? And so the way he reacts to that is he tries to control the situation. So he gets triggered by the content, how she's presenting the story. It's different than how he understands it. And he'll try to control his own probably overwhelm, but also control the way she's using her body language and how she brings things up. So out of those three, where would you like to start first?
Probably like me being more directive. Like I'm not quite sure what, like when we're talking and stuff, I feel like she wants me to be like, hey, you should do this, then this, then this, then this, and then tell him like he should do this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's
Okay.
not like, that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you guys have to learn together what works for you guys, because like what works for like say me or someone else won't work for you kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what she wants is me to be like, this is what you guys need to work on, and like be specific about what those things are.
I mean, this is going to sound crass, but it doesn't matter what she says as far as like what she wants. Like ultimately, what I believe all couples especially want is their goals to be met, right? And them to transition into a way of being, a way of interacting that meets both of their needs, right? And she has an idea. Of course, you said she's the pursuer. Pursuers are often the ones with the ideas of what needs to happen. And it's like then if you give into the way she's asking for something to be done, you're just being invited into their cycle.
Okay.
Then the scaffolds is that then he thinks you're taking her side and you're more aligned with her, and right, you're more responsive to her. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm curious about, so you wanted to start with like the directive piece. So I'm curious because EFT can be implemented, and I'm assuming you're working out of an EFT modality. You're trying to,
yeah, I'm
So
trying.
EFT can definitely be implemented in a directive way, and a lot of parts within EFT are directive. They're quite directive because you have to decide, for example, at what point is this person ready to do an enactment, to turn to their partner, and that's a decision, right? That's directive from that sense. So I like to think of it more as like just facilitating, because you're really just facilitating in stage one, getting out to the surface what's already there. And one way to put it is you're trying to make what's invisible or that's like suppressed and pushed down, as far as their experience, you want that to come to the surface. And that can only happen when the right environment is created, right? Slowing down, they both feel attachment towards you, like you're on both their sides, right? You're in the middle, and you're doing certain interventions when you're working with each of them individually that make them feel comfortable for that stuff to come to the surface, right? So what would you say in the 4 or so sessions you've done, like what does it look like, the way you're implementing EFT? Maybe give me like a synopsis of what it looks like right now.
Well, we tried, like I was trying to get them to do an enactment, and like I feel like I feel like we start off really well in our sessions, and then when we talk about like I'll be like, how was the week or something, they're like good, and then they'll pick something. For example, like they were like putting away a tent or something the other day. They went camping and they were like putting away a tent, and then I was like, okay, like tell me how that went for you. So the guy started, and he was like, oh, she's like, she asked me to put the tent away because it's like a blue thing to do, like a guy's thing to do, and that like pissed him off. And she was just saying that because she was like putting the dishes away or something like that. Anyways, like regardless of whatever happens, it'll start off slow, and they'll be like, okay, like how did that, like what was coming up for you, like how are you feeling when she said the blue comment or whatever. But like before we even like get there, like she'll like tell her side of the story, like they both share, but then they don't agree with like what, like that's not how the events went down. And before I can like
Yeah.
say anything, they both start going. And like on Zoom, like one of their voices will always get muted because the louder one, it'll pick up more. And then I'm like, okay, stop. Like, and they'll be like, no, you got 10 seconds to talk. Now it's like I get 10, or sorry, you get 10 minutes to talk. Now I get 10 minutes to talk. And I do want to make sure they both get like a chance to talk, because I do think because the guy does talk more.
To talk about which version is correct.
Yeah. And I was like, does
You're
it
spending 10
matter?
minutes finding it. Right.
And I'm like, it doesn't
So
matter.
let me even just at the outset, there's a few things there.
Okay.
So the first is there's proactive things you can do to frame what it is you're looking for, right?
Okay.
So for you, do you know why you're looking for the story, so to speak? Like, what's the purpose of asking? Like, what was your week like? Do you know
why I asked
sort of from an from an EFT perspective, why do we even do that? What are we trying to get?
To the emotion, like what they're feeling.
Part of it, is to the experience, but why do we start with like what happened during the week? Like, why in particular are we asking about content?
To like, well, like in the bigger pictures, to understand like their cycle, and to understand like how the trigger, like whatever is triggering them, goes into like what their emotional, like whatever's coming up for them emotionally, and then their behavior.
That's right. So part of it on the one level is to understand the dynamic, right? The cycle. And from the other level, it is for both of them to get an entry point. This is the key word. It's like an entry point into like, we don't need much, essentially, is what I'm trying to get at. We need an entry point to their experience, right? You can do that in 30 seconds, right? Like it's not about the story, right? You're looking for the trigger, like a trigger for him and a trigger for her. And that's really all you need, right?
Yeah.
It's not about letting them know the story doesn't matter. So one way to frame the ask, the request that you're asking is, and I do this a lot, so I did this today. What I'm looking for is what a video camera would see, right? And I would explain, especially the first time. So what would a video camera see? It doesn't see what's going on inside of you, right? It doesn't see when you're describing the story, so to speak. It doesn't show what the other person's intention was. It doesn't speak to their, like, you diagnosing them or you labeling what it is that they're doing, right? Or any of that stuff, right? And so I would ask, so when you are describing the story, I'm just looking for like, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Literally what a camera would see. The what was said and how it was said, right? And that's it, right? And the other piece of that is it needs to be, when I'm asking, something that feels unresolved, something that when you think about is still sort of activated. You don't feel like you have a full repair around, right? Because what we're wanting to do is convert the current cycle or the current moment that they lost themselves into. They both got triggered, and be able to complete that cycle and create a new cycle out of it, right? The one that allows them to really understand each other and to connect around, right? So the invisible stuff that's not shared, right? And so framing it that way can help, right? And then it's our job to help kind of just slow it down and to create some kind of direction. Like, okay, so this happened, and then he did this, or you did that, right? And then that happened, right? And then you go back and forth. So you're co-creating the story together, right? So you might go knowing that, he might get triggered. So, okay, so she said this is what happened. Okay, and then does that sound right? You go to him, and then what happened? You go to him, and you go to her. So this kind of thing can help with that. So like just proactively framing what you're looking for, and then two, kind of allowing both of them to co-create the story can help, right? But ultimately, you're really just kind of trying to hone in on this one piece. So what did you do that triggered him, and what did he do that triggered you? That's really all you're looking for. You write down these, the behavior. That's really all it is. Then you might ask the other person, do you remember how they did it? What was their nonverbals like? What was their tone? What was their gesture? What was their facial expression? Something like that, so that you can get to know what that person's trigger is, right? It's not about getting the whole cycle and what happened, this 10-hour fight that they had. No, it could be the end, it could be in the middle, it could be in the beginning, right? Ultimately, it's the same messages, just as the cycle grows, getting amplified more and more and more. That's really all it is.
I find that when I do that, or at least I guess I'm trying to do that, is like they get triggered in the moment as well. Like she'll tell her side and then he'll tell her his side, which is obviously they're different, but which I find that he usually.
So already, if it's a video camera, how could they be different, right? You're not looking, there really isn't a difference when you're talking about an objective behavior, right? They might not agree on the degree, but they're going to agree that that person said that thing, hopefully, right? So you're going,
that's what
okay,
I'm having. They don't agree on even like what they said, or like just like the way they said it.
So then you can go into like, out of this whole thing, what was it that triggered you the most? What do you remember was the last thing before you got upset, right?
Okay.
And then you can go and do the same thing with her, right? Like you might write down the picnic situation, and then you've already got his story, and then you're using that as an entry point. You don't have to have the whole story, especially with a couple that's quite escalated, right? You're there really just to get, you can go, hey, because I like to start the session not with like, how was your week, but leaving last session, what was it that you took from last session that you try to implement into the week? And or what insight were you able to get either at the session or in the week as your week went on, right? And then have the other person acknowledge, yes, I noticed that they were doing this thing differently, they were putting this effort into this area. So it always starts with a little bit more of like a acknowledgement and giving credit to what the person was trying to do, even though of course there's a lot more work to be done, but starting at that point and then switching over to the work, right? That could help as well. And then you have to, in EFT, especially with a couple like this, I wouldn't call it playing referee, although sometimes I'll refer to it as that, but know when to interject, right? Know when you go, okay, I have to take over, right? Because allowing them to go on too long is not really helpful. It's just really just you seeing what they do at home, and it may not be harmful because it's what they're already used to, but it's just not helpful, right? And so what I do is I really, when they're escalating, just try to note down one thing that each of them did, and essentially thank them for allowing me to see what their inner world, at home looks like. And then just whatever I jotted down as far as what I noticed, that's where we're going to be our starting point. We move away from the story of the week and then just go into exactly what just happened right now in the session, because that's really helpful, right? You don't need the story. In your case, with a couple like this, you probably won't even need a story, right? You just wait for them to get triggered, and then you utilize that as their entry points.
Yeah. And like I like already feel like I have a good sense of like his trigger is always like her tone, or like being spoken to like in a way that he doesn't like. And then her is that he like uses like all these, like he'll like go like down five like in her face, and that triggers her. Or like he mocks her, that's like her trigger.
Yeah.
And then
You have a good sense of the behaviors, but I wonder, do you have a good sense of what's actually happening to them when they're triggered?
I feel like, I mean, from now, just like in these 4 sessions, like for him, when he gets triggered, I feel like he shuts down because he doesn't feel like he should be communicated with him. And he says he shuts down, but I think he just gets mad and his anger increases. And before he has like a blow up, which he usually says he does, he just like leaves, or he gets her to leave. So he doesn't have that. And like she's mentioned, like he's punched holes in the wall and then like thrown furniture and stuff. And then for her, because of her background, like she was able to share that.
So let's go with him first, because you described him. So did you tell me what his coping and what you noticed his responses are and what he says his responses are, or did you describe his actual experience to me?
I think a bit of both, maybe.
The closest to his experience that I heard was overwhelmed, but you also said you don't see it. You don't see it in session. It's just what you're stating what he's described. that he shuts down and he is overwhelmed, right? So
And
I wonder how much of that you're actually able to go into in the session, right?
yeah.
Because if you can get that to come to the surface, that's going to be a lot more inviting to her than the thing that you said afterwards, which is him trying to control the situation by mocking her, by walking away, all of the things he does to cope with the feeling, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's been allowed to come to the surface, and that's still just the kind of the tip of the iceberg as far as his experience.
He has shared that with her, like, or with us. And I asked the girl, like, how do you feel about what he just told you? And she said she'll be like, he uses that as an excuse.
Did you feel
Sorry,
did you feel it in the room?
what he was saying was true.
Well, that answers it. So did you feel his experience of either shutting down, or when he did the enactment, did you feel that what he was sharing was, let's say genuine, authentic, that's what he was actually experiencing? Was it congruent for you? Because when
Not
she's
really,
saying
to be
that,
honest.
right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. You answered it for me. So when you asked him to do the enactment, did you feel that that was in the room, what his primary experience, before you asked him to enact it?
I don't know.
Right.
Like, I thought it was, but then when he did the enactment, like, I didn't feel like he was being like sincere, like he wasn't actually like showing what he was truly feeling.
So when it was just you and him, and him looking at you, it felt real. And then when you got him to turn to her, then it didn't feel
Well, it's
real.
on Zoom, so like I can't, like, we're like us three are just kind of like looking at, like, it's kind of hard.
There's definitely the limitation of the platform. It doesn't help, right? But I'll say differently, then when you were working with him before you got him to say the things to her, did you feel it was real for you?
When he was just talking to me, yes. Like, I felt like like I did have a little bit of sense that it was like a part of it wasn't, but for the majority, like, I felt like he was most sincere when he was telling me about it.
Right.
But when he turned to her, like, I didn't feel
that. So if it didn't feel sincere, then you would continue to facilitate until it fully feels like what he's saying is completely congruent with what he's non-verbally showing. Okay. And so then you didn't go deep enough with him. But if you did go deep enough with him and you did feel it, right, then probably what happened is when you got him to turn to her, right, what he ended up sharing was too overwhelming. Like, he wasn't ready yet, right? So it didn't come across very genuine, right? Which is why then she didn't believe it. It doesn't mean it wasn't a risk. It was still a risk. It's just like when you get someone to go too far outside of their comfort zone, they're not going to share it in the same way that he looked like when you were facilitating. So it sounds like, my sense is, you did facilitate, you got him below the kind of surface level, and you probably then just asked him to share. Instead, what you needed to do was to ask him, what would that be like to share? To just think about sharing, before taking a big risk. He would have given you some kind of impression of whether he's ready to share what he is sharing with you. I know it's sometimes at first can seem like it's the same thing. Looking at you, it's safer than looking at the partner that he's expecting, the attachment figure that he's expecting to get a bad response from. And then, of course, he got a bad response, and that just reinforces the fear, which then makes it even harder next time to go down there and to share, right? So I think that's one thing. You might be rushing the process when it comes to the enactments, whether you're not going deep enough yet, or you got there. I'm 90% sure it's the latter. You got there, but then you made him go too far outside his comfort zone. So what would have been a better, what we call a thin slice, is to get him to acknowledge, this is scary, and what are you afraid of happening? And then he would have said something like, I'm afraid of her saying that she doesn't believe me, for one, right? Maybe it's other fears as well. And then he can share that as a fear. right? So he goes, as you can ask him, can you turn to her, and as you right now you're feeling that anticipatory sort of like anxiety around how she's going to respond, can you let her know, here's what I'm worried about happening. I'm worried that if I was to really share my experience with you, this is what I would get back. And
Okay.
that would probably come across much more authentic,
Okay.
because it'll be congruent, right?
Mhm.
It's within his window of tolerance.
Okay.
So it'll come across more real. And then she'll believe that, right?
Okay.
And she can then do the more, because she can really connect with that fear and see that it's real because he's sharing it more authentically. She'll be more inclined to be able to say something to the effect of, oh, I didn't know you were scared. Oh, I don't want you to be scared. Oh, if you were to share with me, I'll try to be there, or I'll try to not do that thing. So some
Mhm.
kind of reassurance.
Mhm.
And then that would feel good. That would bring down the fear, right?
Mhm.
And so that also might explain this sort of sense of him not doing as much work, because maybe he thinks, if I do the work, I'm going to get rejected. So every
Mhm.
time I do the work and I get rejected, then I'm just going to go back to my bubble,
Yeah.
and it's safe here. And it's safe to try to manage your anxiety by telling you that you're out of control, and all the kind of facial expressions that you showed that he does, and walking away and getting angry, because it's better than experiencing the pain of being, rejected for trying.
Mhm. Okay. He did mention like he was like very sensitive last week, and I thought that was like the first time he really like acknowledged like something like vulnerable about himself, because before he was just like, it was always like anger or like just nothing.
You
Those were
couldn't tell that from when she's telling a story and he gets triggered.
yeah, no, but I wanted him to like say it, right? So it was cool that he said it instead of
Yeah, well, yeah.
yeah.
But it's our job when we're noticing these things that are there under the surface, is to go in there and sort of create that space that they can come forward and share that. So you did, you were able to do that last week, right? So
Mhm.
without thinking like that it's up to him to do it, it really is. EFT is quite directive in that way, is that like it's up to us to see it, and then
Mhm.
it's up to us to facilitate the safety that is required to allow them to feel safe enough to do so, right? Because we're not an attachment figure. It's much safer to do it with us. We just
Mhm.
become this external brain for them, to be able to then somewhat do like these sometimes we're working to get to the enactment, and for different people there's different levels of like fear and expectation because of their past, that then we have to be this externalized enactment for them sometimes, and working over time to let them like see, look, when you do this, even if it's like the most like remote kind of enactment, like even if all you get is pure like resistance,
Mhm.
and their partner will see, oh, they'll see them in a different way, because someone else is working with them to try to get them to get in touch with what's going on, and they like notice all this resistance. And
Mhm.
if we just label that as fear, and they go, yeah, I'm scared to acknowledge that this is hard for me, um, even without them having to do the enactment, we just go to their partner and go like, wow, look, we just spent 30 minutes trying so hard to work with him, and like, look how hard, like he's holding on to this, he so deeply believes he's going to get a bad response, that this is, that's so hard for him to acknowledge that this is there. What's that like for you, without him having to do anything, right? Like
Mhm.
we're creating these baby steps so that they get enough reinforcement on the earlier stuff, so that that gives them the confidence to do this, right? They need to almost know that it's not a leap of faith, that they need to know they're going to get a good response, the
Mhm.
ones that have the most trauma, before they take any like what we can sort of consider as like real like external risks.
Mhm.
Because for them it is a risk. That's why the window of tolerance piece is so important, to recognize the sensitivity, to recognize that there's so many fears in there, whether it's due to the current relationship or due to the past. Either way, it's showing up today. It's showing up because it was programmed from some past event.
Mhm. He was like able to shed some light on why, like where that came from as well, which was cool to understand like where it kind of started and like a bit about his past. And even previous relationships, he said like the girl that he was with was always just like very like passive, like never challenged him that way or anything. So this is like his first time being in a relationship where the girl just won't say anything. She's actually like being like, hey, like I don't like this or whatever. So I think that's different for him as well.
Since childhood, he means?
Yeah, like
Because his childhood was probably very challenging.
yeah, he said his like dad made fun of him a lot, like, and not the other siblings. And then he said he like grew up
And
in a
that's why he's so sensitive to her tone, right?
yeah.
And he chose very safe relationships so that he wouldn't have to experience that. But
Mhm.
then that just kind of helped maybe build him up to feel like ready to overcome some of these. You can't really open up your heart essentially to someone that, it's horrible to sort of think of it this way, but to someone that doesn't represent something that you can project onto from your childhood,
Mhm.
because it's like you won't take, you're picking someone really safe for you so they can connect with you, maybe not, not fully, and then you can't really connect with them, and so it's easier to sort of build yourself up that way.
Mhm.
But yeah, but then this is the relationship we can actually feel attached, and then of course that brings up all his old wounds.
Yeah. For the like female, how maybe like if you could help me like navigate like what to do with her, because I feel like she's really open and like she's very honest about how she's feeling. Um, and when she
How do her enactments go?
like she's able to share, like we've done a few, but he like again like is focused on content versus like how she's like what she's saying. Like
So
he'll
what do you mean when you say that she's open to sharing and she's sharing her feelings? What does that look like?
like she'll say like this is really difficult. I don't know if it's like worth doing this anymore. Like she's like very like honest
Is
about
that a feeling or a perception?
well, I mean, I think that's because she feels like when she first started like the counseling when they first came, she was like very like optimistic. She was like really determined. And I've noticed
Right.
like throughout the sessions,
Yeah.
like she's just
Yeah.
like not feeling it. And she
Yeah.
feels um
Yeah. But the way you phrased it, or you paraphrased her, is these are decisions. These are in reaction to feeling hopeless. They're not the experience of being hopeless,
oh, okay.
right?
Yeah.
So it's very easy for someone that's sensitive like him to hear it as, his biggest fear, or his fear that she's just like ready to leave and
Right.
he's failed her and all that kind of stuff, right? So of course it's going to trigger him, right?
Yeah.
So primary emotions are those that bring our partner in. They're not statements. They're like palpable, like you can feel whatever is there. So I think there's like a, not a conscious one, but there's like a unconscious bias for you to really connect with her and then not really be able to connect with him. So you think she's sharing and she's open, but she's not really connecting to, or you're not facilitating with her enough to get underneath it. And
Mhm.
what that does is then what she ends up sharing, he doesn't end up really hearing what's going on for her because she's not sharing uh like in a primary way,
Oh, okay. See,
right?
I felt like it
And I
was
wonder, right?
like I
Yeah,
felt like
I
right
well, both
having
of them. Yeah, both
yeah.
both of them, both of them are like you described, right? Like maybe for him it actually went beyond what he was comfortable sharing. But with her, what she's sharing with him in session are things she's already comfortable sharing with him at home, right?
Mhm.
So your job is to meet both of them where they're at and find where is it within each of their window of tolerance. It's like risky but not too risky, right?
Mhm.
So he will have a very different challenge than her, but if what she's sharing she's already comfortable sharing, where's the risk in that for her?
Mhm. Well, that was the first time she said that. Like she hasn't shared that with him, the fact that she's like losing hope in this and that she doesn't know if it's worth it. Um that was like the first time he's heard that too, and the first time I heard that as well. Um but I feel like we spend a lot of time with the guy, And like he does like give and talk a lot. And like if she's trying to talk, he'll cut her off, and then she'll have to be like, I let you talk, let me talk, kind of thing.
Is there anything where you've gone with her where you've noticed as you're going with her in that direction, it pulls him in and he interrupts less and he's like more focused?
No.
Yeah, so that's what I would say is you're not facilitating like the deeper experience with her.
With her.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. I find that he like for obvious reasons gets defensive or feels triggered when we talk, and then he has to like say something, and then the way that he says something will trigger her and she'll get even more upset. Like one, in the fact that
yeah,
he's interrupting her and she doesn't do that to him, and then B, on top of that he uses words that she finds hurtful.
yeah. And then that's where you can go. You can go when it happens in session, you can go right now. What's the interpretation or what's the meaning you make out of what he just said? And go right into her experience,
Okay.
like of what just happened. Because you don't want to like focus, like trying to refocus on what you started with the story. If things are happening in the room, like there's live things going on, you follow what's like EFT is big on following the experience. So if new things are happening, you follow that.
Okay.
Right? Because that's creating an amygdala response in her. And then you're trying to ask her to remember something from last week. And it's like, well, those are different parts of the brain working. And if she's already in her amygdala, you stay with it,
Okay.
right? You just give get the meaning that her amygdala is taking right now from what he's doing, because she's obviously not seeing it as what he would frame it as, right? He would probably frame it as, I'm triggered and I'm protecting myself, and she's seeing it as he's attacking me, right? And it's like probably very different things. And if you aren't following it, then again they're gonna make meaning out of the behaviors that they're already used to making meaning out of, right? Whereas the amygdala is already activated, you go with it, right?
Okay.
It's like you have to be really like adaptive and really just follow wherever the energy is going,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So let's say he interrupts, and you see something on her face and you go, oh, there's something really important here. What's coming up for you, right? Like right now. So I just noticed him saying this thing in this particular way. What did you take that to mean? And right, like when you think that, let's say she took it to mean he hates me or something like that, just something like that, right? That's like a common sort of belief maybe. And what's it like to think that he hates you? Like, so some sadness, hopelessness, even hopelessness, it's not really a tangible like primary experience if you don't get the sadness with it, right? You don't get that deflated sort of, like, your job is to really bring up the like primary, like tangible, visceral like feeling. If you don't feel what she's going through, and it's just like I'm saying hopeless to protect myself as a like defensive sort of stance, then it's not the same thing as the sadness. Because when I say sadness, I don't mean like she's crying or she's saying certain words. It's the actual experience of sadness. It doesn't matter what the words that come with it are per se. It's the actual experience, right? Which is, the primary emotions are, to some extent, when they're shown very, very explicitly, very clearly, they're undeniable. They're just, we feel them to differing degrees, but they're there, right? Babies make it really simple. It's very like hard on your sleeve. There's no kind of defenses around it, and you're trying to get them to show it in that way.
Okay. I think that's about it. I think I was gonna mention, but I think this is just like I've mentioned it to you before, that he kind of like underline like mocks therapy sometimes. Like, remember I told you last session, I can't even remember what he said, but it was something about like the difference between like I should know definitions or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then this time he like mentioned to her like, because I always say like I was saying like when she'd bring something up, I'm like, okay, like what emotion are you feeling or something like that, like where in your body are you feeling it? But he like uses that as well, and I'm not sure if he's doing that like as a joke or, but she like, it obviously doesn't go well with her when he says it to her. But I don't
What
know
does he
if I
say in that particular
like,
situation?
he'll be like,
How does he say joke?
like for example, like me and the girl were talking, and she was telling me about how she was feeling when he says like take 5, stand down, count to 3, like because he was like, I don't like when she talks to me like a kid, and then he does that to her. And so she was saying like, I don't like when he talks to me like that. And then she's like, and then he'll be like, I need you to like find in your body, like emotions are everywhere in your body, like look at your body and find where the emotion is coming from. And like, I really need you to think about where this, and like, I'm like, is he like, is he like making fun of this, or is, because I don't like, personally, I think he's just like making fun of it. And it pisses her off because we're actually trying to find out like what's going on for her.
Yeah, probably it probably triggers you too. So I don't want to like attribute like intent, but you did say that 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 it might come right after a moment where he says or experiences being talked to like a kid, and maybe he copes with that by trying to kind of send the same energy back. So he's feeling like someone's talking down to him, so he ends up talking down to someone else, and that's how he learned to cope, right?
So she feels
So
like that. Like we were talking about how she's feeling like he talks to her as a kid.
yeah, but you said earlier like it comes right after him saying, oh, I don't like how you talk to me, it's like you're talking to me like a kid, and then in response, when you're then focusing on her, then he's being condescending back. So the way he's perceiving it is like, look, you're going to her after I was just talked to like a kid, and so I'm going to interrupt your process, right? Because and then it relates to what you said earlier about just mocking therapy in general, right? If he's triggered in any particular moment, or he's seeing that there isn't progress or whatever else, right? How he copes is to judge the thing that is triggering him. It's just a way to distance, and it's just another form of resistance, right? But you neutralize it by finding a way to be able to validate it, finding a way in him, in his past, for why this makes sense for him.
So you're saying like if when she, like the lady talks to him as a baby and then he does it back, like that's why he felt like he needed to say that at that time.
It's not the why. The why is his childhood, right? And this coping being a survival mechanism to survive that childhood. So one way to go in there is, if he's, let's say, the one, interrupting the session, and he won't let you go any further with her, for example, I would go, hey, let's go back a couple steps. Let's just find out. My sense is you're triggered right now. I'm really trying to understand what happened. If you personally don't remember what she did, hey, can you help me understand, like, what did she just do that you remember that was a trigger for you just now? And then going into his process, you can go into like, and then because as you go deeper, you can go, hey, and then you responded after all of this by, telling her to feel in her body and that kind of thing. And it's almost like this, you can give it a name, like this, like teacher, instructor, that kind of thing, coach. And it sounds like that's a way you're coping, right? Is that in response to, you have to get to the feeling, because you can't just say that you don't get to the feeling. So for example, let's just say what's an example of what she might do that he ends up interpreting like she's talking down to him, or talking to him like he's a kid? What's a behavior? Hands, perfect. So you just told me it's when she used her hands, right? So how do you interpret that when she uses her hands? He might say, oh, it's, she's like a teacher, she's like, she knows best, right? That kind of thing. She's my authority figure. That's the message she's receiving. It's probably not the message she's trying to send, but it's what he's sensitive to hearing. So then you hear it as this like teacher student or master expert kind of pupil, whatever, or like, I'm good, you're bad, something like that. You hear it that way. And then what do you tell yourself? What do you try to tell yourself in that moment, right? Maybe he'll go like, like screw, like maybe he says something like screw that. So it's like the instant response to it. Oh, so you say screw that. And so that's the voice of the coping. Screw that, I'm not going to let her talk to me like that. Then I go this way. So then you do this and you come on top and you kind of overpower it. That's maybe how you cope when you hear it this way. Now I want to get to the vulnerable thing he says to himself. So I might go, now this is your partner. This isn't the expert. This isn't, this is your partner of X years that you love very much, that you've been coming for 5 sessions, all these kinds of things. And that you're obviously putting a lot of effort into being here. You gave her an ultimatum to be in. So you obviously really want to make this work. And so now it's come to the room. This is your partner that you're hearing as this authority figure with her hands, right? What do you tell yourself when you hear this? This your partner that's supposed to be loving you, that's supposed to be gentle, right? And you're hearing this. So then the underlying thought in the moment might be like, how could she? Or, it hurts, or this is like an attack, something like that. Any of those are fine. You can run with them. You go, what's it like to think that your partner of 7 years or whatever is attacking you, for no reason? They're just attacking you. What's that like? Now you're going to get into the vulnerability. It hurts, and then you open that up as much as you can. And then before you do the enactment, you make sure, what would it be like to let her know that? Look at her right now. And you can use her nonverbals that she's displaying in the moment. You can say, like, look at her right now, before you even share, before anything, especially if she's giving like very like, please share with me vibes. And you can go, look, she seems to be really attentive. Like, do you see that? Like, she wants to really hear this. And but it's still scary, right? Yeah. And so what would it be like? It's scary. What would you anticipate her saying? What are you afraid? Some men can't own at the beginning, like the word fear, but you can go, okay, what do you expect her to say, right? It's the same idea. So it doesn't matter what they're able to own as far as the words. What they're experiencing. If it wasn't hard, they would just be able to say it, right? So, but it's got to be language that in the moment fits for them. Or that they're comfortable admitting, essentially exposing, because this is all about like taking layers off and exposing over time and getting deeper and deeper. So yeah, again, like we said before, then you can share the fear, right? So this is sort of the idea. What do you do when someone's interrupting? Well, they obviously are in a lot of pain. Let's get underneath that pain. They're essentially telling me, I'm in more pain than my partner. I really need to be heard first.
I think the one thing I struggle with that is that he always needs to be heard. So at some points, I almost like ignore that and go with her and she's like verbalized this to me as well. She feels like a lot of the sessions are about him talking to him and stuff. Yeah. And she thinks like, obviously that's unfair. And so when I do try with her, I feel like he interrupts. So I go back to him and then.
Yeah. In terms of volume, I'm sure that that's the case, but in terms of depth, I don't think it is, right? You said she's losing hope. She feels like she's doing more work. So what does that mean, right? He's not getting, I'm not saying he doesn't have the platform to do more work. He hasn't been able to do more work, the deeper work. So if that's the complaint, right? When either party, takes an emotional risk, I've never seen someone go, oh, he's getting more floor time or she's getting more floor time, because they benefit equally from those risks. So that's why I'm thinking you're not going deep enough, or you are with him and then it was that one time it was too much as far as what he enacted. So in that case, slowing down, only enacting what is congruent, right? You want to get the type of enactment where you feel fully connected to what he's sharing. So you felt it when he was looking at you, when you were working with him, and then when he shared it with her, you didn't feel it. That means something was off. Whether it's over risking for him, whether it's like he looked in her eyes and something didn't feel safe, or whatever it is, that's something that you want to explore and find out what happened. That's what we call catching the bullet. Because if an enactment doesn't go well, we want to understand why, right? So I'm sure it was really painful for him, for her to say, I don't believe that. I don't believe what he's going through, because I'm sure it was still a risk for him, which then of course he has to come over the top.
He uses that as, like, she didn't say she didn't believe him. She said he always uses that as his excuse.
So what does that tell you? If she believed
him,
which she didn't believe.
Yeah.
So it's one way or the other. Ultimately, she wasn't moved by it. She wasn't moved by his enacting, right? So whatever the language we have, it's, I don't think he was most likely congruent with what he shared. And it's like, again, like we said with her, the level of sharing when she's enacting is probably not any deeper than what she is already comfortable to do. In the same way, what she ended up hearing was no different than what she's used to hearing as far as the depth. So that tells me he went back to default, and your job is to help him share in a way that's hard, not share in a way that he's used to.
Okay.
Right? So if he looked at you and he shared vulnerably, and then he looked at her and it didn't come out the same way, I would go, oh, hold on. So when you were just sharing with me, you shared it this way, shared with her, you shared another way. Like, what's going on? Like, what's coming up for you right now? What was it like to share just now? And then he can enlighten the two of you on what was coming up for him. And then you can go back and refocus on that, the more primary experience. And then he goes, maybe he'll say again, oh, that I couldn't do it that way. It's too hard. Okay, that's a fear, right? Let's share it as a fear. Okay. And that's still primary. Fears are just as primary as anything else. But it's just a preemptive thing that we have to start with before we go deeper. And sometimes we have to share fear a couple of times, because, for example, you might get a good response to the fear, and then it goes, yeah, this feels good, but at home this would happen, or so you share another fear. I'm in this space, I can do it, but then at home I'm still worried about how it's going to go. You share whatever comes up as it comes up, and really all you're trying to do. Thanks, Esther. You're trying to share like whatever is at that window, and you'll get good at recognizing that window. But yeah, I mean, see, there's a contradiction, right? She says he gets too much time, but then she says, I'm doing more work. So which is it, right? Time is not like, time and work are very different. You can have more time, doesn't mean you're doing more work. And vice versa. I don't know how much work she's doing. Again, it's about sharing what is vulnerable. I used to in the beginning get the complaint of, okay, he talks more than me, or I talk more. I never get that anymore, because when you get them to take risks, it's a win-win for both of them, right? The person gets to express what they don't get to express, and they get to feel really good about their partner hearing them, or reinforcing that. Like, it's a reinforcing corrective experience. When you get to share and it feels really good, it's corrective. It's like rewiring your past. Whether it's just a recent relationship, or whether it's just earlier in this relationship, or it's your childhood, you're rewiring something that your fear is protecting you from. And in the same respect, being able to see your partner in a light that's different than what you're used to is also a win-win, right? You may not believe that this is the real them if it's the first time, but in the moment, you're not going to deny that it's real. It's just you're comparing it to what your mind is saying, what you're used to, and you're like, I like this, but it's really confusing. That could be a good first response. But you break it down. I really like this person, the way they're sharing, but I'm having a hard time because it's so different, and what it would mean that I would have to open myself up again to all this hurt and pain. And that kind of thing. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, to summarize, don't listen so much to what they say they want. All they're always saying is, I want to deepen our experience. I want to deepen our ability to express the impact of the way that we're currently interacting. And what, like, until you can do that consistently, the safety won't be there, the de-escalation or the escalation won't de-escalate, right? But each time you do it successfully, it will do that. You'll move the needle in that direction where they're moving towards de-escalation.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah.
Watch some good like Sue stage 1 videos, find some good EFT stage 1 videos.
Okay.
And where they're like, and you'll get, and look out for that window of tolerance piece of like thin slicing the risk.
Okay.
Don't ever risk beyond what they're capable of risking.
Okay.
Even though he seems all confident in everything, he's confident to show anger. He's not confident to be vulnerable and to show that like, here's the chinks in my armor, and here's your gestures affect me to this extent. He's not comfortable to say that, right? And it's like, because remember, it brings him back to that child that was like abused by his dad. And that child did not have the safety to say anything back to his dad, because if he tried, something bad would have happened. It would have made it worse. Today, he does have the safety. He just doesn't know it yet.
Okay.
He has to walk into that. That's what will challenge that worldview and that like expectation that something bad will happen if he shares.
Okay.